Welcome back to Sushi Day, where I am teaching you how to bake a cake when you have no idea what you're doing and have none of the right tools. It's gonna be great. I am making my first ever layer cake. First thing I've got to do is bake the cake, and since I'm not an experienced cake baker, I am going with a recipe from the experts. I am using Elizabeth LeBau's Sugar Hero blog for the recipes today, and we're gonna bake her white cake. So what we're doing for this cake is I am making a sour candy inspired cake. When I mentioned a few months ago that I've always wanted to learn how to decorate cakes, my sister-in-law was like, hey, your brother's half birthday is coming up. Why don't you make him a half birthday cake? Of course, I totally miss his half birthday. But my brother loves sour candy, and I asked him, and his favorite sour candy flavor is blue raspberry. So that is what we were basing this cake off of today. In order to add that blue raspberry flavor to the cake, we're gonna start off by separating the cake batter into 4 different bowls. The first one we're gonna leave plain because I want kind of a gradient white to blue sort of look going on with this too. The other 3 we are going to gradually flavor with more and more blue raspberry lemonade Kool-Aid. I'm just using the powder, I'm just mixing it in, and it will add flavor, but it's also gonna add color. So we're gonna go from white to blue, we're going to go from plain to blue raspberry, and hopefully this is gonna look really cool at the end. Bake the cakes, cool the cakes, wrap them up and freeze the cakes so that they're easier to work with when we're actually frosting the final thing. Also means I don't have to frost the cake right away. So if it takes me a few days to get around to the frosting, it's okay. Now, onto the frosting. Same deal, I'm using a recipe from Sugar Hero from actually the same blog post, and I'm coloring it with the Kool-Aid again. So it's going to have that gradient sort of thing. Some of it I'm leaving white, some of it I'm adding a little bit of Kool-Aid powder, some of it I'm also adding some teal gel food coloring because I want the frosting to be a bit more vibrant than the cake itself. So I want to make sure I really get some color coming through there. We've got the cake, we've got the frosting. Last component is the filling. Now, if you wanted to, you could totally just use frosting in between the layers, but I wanted to really amp up that sour flavor, and I also just happened to have some lemon curd that I had made. It worked out. So I am putting lemon curd in between the layers of the cake. I mentioned before I wanted this to kind of have that like gradient ombre sort of look to it. So I'm putting down the darkest color on the bottom and kind of gradienting it up to the white cake on top. Pipe a good thick line of frosting around the outside, and then fill it with as much lemon curd as will fit, but don't overflow it because it will definitely just like ooze out if you put too much in. So you don't want to do that. And do that until you reach the very top. Then it's frosting time. It's frosting time. I am attempting, with all of the wrong tools, to do one of those crumb coats. You know how the professional bakers do it, where they put a very, very thin layer of frosting on the outside to kind of keep the crumbs in, so that when you put the real frosting, you don't have like crumbs all over the place. That's what I'm doing. Very poorly, but I'm doing it. The cake is layered, the cake is filled, the cake has its crumb coat, and I think technically at this point you're supposed to like freeze it or refrigerate it to just kind of keep everything cold. But I don't have that much space in my freezer or in my fridge. There's no way I can fit this. So we're just moving on and hoping for the best. Ombre on the inside, ombre on the outside. I've got it with the cake layers, so I also want that pretty ombre look with the frosting. So I'm using the darkest color, the most teal color frosting on the bottom, and then kind of working my way up to the lighter colors at the top. I'm putting a ton of frosting on here. Like you really, really want a thick layer of frosting because you're gonna be smoothing it out, so you want it to be able to kind of cover the whole thing. I have literally none of the right tools here. I'm using the photography little spinny thing for my cake turner because I don't have one. I do have a bench scraper. I'm using that. Somewhere in this house, I hypothetically, technically own an offset spatula. Where the heck it is, I have not a dang clue. We have searched everywhere. Cannot freaking find it. So we're working with what we've got. Okay, that wasn't too bad. And I think it looks pretty cool. We've got a bunch of extra frosting on the bench scraper, and I didn't want it to go to waste, so I just kind of put it on the top. I made the top a pretty color gradient too. I think it looks nice. Now for decorations. I had a lot of ideas. I've abandoned a lot of ideas. So for decoration, I really want to amp up the sour candy flavor of this. So I'm using more of the Kool-Aid powder and just sprinkling it over the top. I've done this before. I actually tested it out ahead of time to make sure it would work. And it'll just kind of stay on top of the frosting. It doesn't really get like soaked in or anything. So it works out as like, it's like that sour candy powder, and it works really well for this. I also have fresh raspberries that I thought about candying and decided that was too much work. And I also have some sour candy worms that I'm just gonna kind of like arrange on top to make a pretty little arrangement that looks like all of the Pinterest things that I've seen. And I hope it doesn't look like a 5-year-old made a cake. This is my cake. It's the first cake I've ever made, the first layer cake I've ever made. And it's a little crooked, but I think it looks pretty cool. But none of that is important. The very most important thing is, how does it taste? It's tasting time. Let's try some cake. So if you get a bite just with the lemon curd, it is very tart. It's good, but it's very tart. But if you get a bite with just the frosting and none of the lemon curd, it's very sweet. So the ideal bite would contain both lemon curd and some frosting to get that perfect tart-sweet balance. The lemon curd is really good in this. It very much adds that tartness that you want for something that you're hoping to be sour. But it does overpower the flavor of the cake, so you can't really tell that the cake is blue raspberry flavored. But if you eat the cake by itself, the flavor does come through. It actually tastes like I'm eating a blue icy flavored cake. It's really tasty. The sour candy is kind of a fun addition to it. It's chewy. It almost reminds me of enjoying boba with your drinks. It adds that chew factor that you don't really get in the rest of the cake. But if you're expecting it, it is kind of fun. And that bit of Kool-Aid sprinkled on the top really does mimic that sour candy sort of sour powder that you get. And it's got that little like granular chew to it, but it adds just this very interesting sort of flavor and texture to the cake. Overall, it is delicious. This is a bit of a heavier, more American style cake, as opposed to like the very light, not quite as sweet Asian style cakes that I really enjoy. But having that lemon curd with all of this really cuts the richness, it cuts the sweetness, so it's not overpoweringly, like unpleasantly sweet. And overall, I think I did a pretty good job with this. I personally might be a little biased, but I think it's a pretty good cake. Thank you so much for watching my first ever self-decorated layer cake slash kind of sort of mukbang video. I hope you enjoyed this. If you are not yet subscribed to our channel, make sure to hit that sub button and like this if you wouldn't mind, because the likes do help our little channel. And leave a comment to let me know what you thought and if you would try this cake. I'll see you next time. Here I thought I was being all clever, doing a sour cake. I just remembered that lemon cakes exist. Told you that was gonna happen.